Harlem, 1948. The air in Mount Olivet Baptist Church hung heavy with lilies and lies. Over 400 souls crammed the pews for Nurse Sadie Mae Washington's funeral. Midwives she'd trained, mothers she'd saved, families she'd healed. The police report was crisp and cold. Heart attack at age 30. Case closed in 6 hours. No autopsy, no questions. But as the preacher droned on about God's mysterious ways, a tall figure in the back row stood. Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson, Harlem's quiet king, the man who'd outsmarted mobs and mayors, walked slowly down the aisle, an anonymous note crumpled in his fist. He reached the open casket, leaned in, gently pushed back the collar of her dress, revealing what heavy makeup had hidden, a necklace of bruises around her neck, strangulation marks clear as day. The church erupted in screams. In the 96 hours that followed, 6 NYPD careers crumbled, 3 killers vanished into the East River, and Harlem learned a brutal truth: some deaths aren't accidents. They're cover-ups. And Bumpy Johnson didn't let them rest in peace. It arrived that morning, slipped under Bumpy's door on 116th Street. No envelope, just scrawled words on cheap paper. Sadie didn't die natural, check the neck. They paid the director $50 to pretty her up for her brother's debt. Bumpy stared at it over coffee. Sadie Mae Washington, 30, nurse at Harlem Hospital, delivered over 300 bobbies without losing one. Her brother Tommy owed gambling debts to Vincent Marconi's crew, Italian loan sharks dipping into Harlem. Bumpy tucked the note away, dressed in his best suit, headed to the church. He'd known Sadie, delivered flowers when her mama died. This smelled like white hands on black business. Mount Olivet overflowed. By 10 a.m. mourners spilled onto the steps, black doctors in ties, nurses in crisp whites, families clutching bobbies Sadie had brought into the world. The casket gleamed up front, Sadie's face peaceful under layers of powder. The funeral director, Elias Crow, fidgeted by the door, pocketing tips like it was just another day. Bumpy slipped in the back, watched the crowd, spotted 6 off-duty NYPD officers in plainclothes, friends of Marconi, no doubt. They nodded to Elias. The eulogy began. Sadie went home to the Lord from a weary heart. Bumpy's hand tightened on the note. Weary, Sadie ran marathons for her patients. Mid-sermon, Bumpy stood, the preacher stuttered, heads turned. He moved like a shadow, slow, deliberate, past whispering widows, past stone-faced gangsters who'd come to pay respects. Reached the casket, Sadie's sister gasped from the front row. Bumpy leaned in, smelled the makeup, thick, unnatural. His fingers, steady as a surgeon's, brushed her collar aside. There, purple-black bruises circling her neck like a noose, finger marks, ligature burns. Not a heart attack. Murder. The first scream came from a nurse nearby. Then 400 voices exploded, wails, shouts, curses. She's been strangled. Lord, no. The 6 cops bolted upright, faces pale. Elias Crow backed toward the exit. Bumpy didn't move, just stared at the marks, committing them to memory, then turned to the crowd. This ain't natural, and it ain't over. Ushers rushed to calm the chaos. Police radioed for backup, but Harlem's fury had ignited. That afternoon, Bumpy visited Tommy Washington, Sadie's brother, holed up in a tenement, shaking from withdrawal. Marconi's boys came for me, Tommy confessed. Owed $2,000 on horses. Sadie stepped in, said she'd pay it off working extra shifts. They laughed, said she'd pay another way. Bumpy's jaw tightened. Sadie had confronted them alone, refused their threats, so they silenced her. Tommy sobbed. Police called it heart failure, but I saw the bruises before Elias covered them. The $50 bribe, Elias cut to slap on makeup and sign off. Bumpy left with names: Vincent Marconi and his 2 enforcers, Gino Rossi and Polly Vitti. 96 hours started now. By dusk, Bumpy's men had Elias Crow in a backroom speakeasy. No guns, just questions. Elias cracked fast. The cops brought her body, said heart attack, gave me $50 to make her presentable, no questions. Who? The 6 officers on Marconi's payroll covering for the hit. Bumpy let Elias go with a warning: testify or join her. That night, anonymous tips flooded precincts, photos of the bruises, witness statements. 2 cops resigned by morning, the other 4 sweating. Day 2, Gino Rossi found floating in the East River, throat slashed, mirroring Sadie's bruises. Day 3, Polly Vitti vanished, body surfaced 24 hours later, weighted down, fish-eaten. Vincent Marconi barricaded in his Little Italy apartment, begging police protection. It's Bumpy, he's coming. The cops, too busy dodging investigations, their captain suspended 2 more, the last 2 quit, pensions gone. Harlem whispered, justice without badges. 4 days, 96 hours of silence that screamed louder than any riot. Harlem had buried Sadie quietly, no brass bands, no big procession. Just a small wooden casket lowered into the ground at Woodlawn Cemetery while gray rain soaked the mourners' coats. But the streets refused to let her rest forgotten. By the morning of the 4th day, word had spread like gasoline on hot pavement. Sadie's name, once whispered in back rooms, was now shouted from stoops, barbershops, and church steps. Mothers who had lost sons to the same crooked badge. Fathers who'd paid protection money to stay alive. Kids who'd seen their older brothers disappear into squad cars and never come home the same. They gathered outside the 28th precinct at Lenox and 123rd. Hundreds at first, then thousands. A sea of dark coats and determined faces under umbrellas that did nothing against the downpour. They chanted her name in rhythm, low and steady like a drumbeat that wouldn't quit. Sadie, Sadie, justice for Sadie. Signs bobbed in the rain. No more silence. Her brother deserved better. And the rot in blue. Bumpy stood near the back edge of the crowd, collar turned up, fedora low over his eyes. He said nothing. Didn't need to. His presence was enough, a quiet storm watching the wave he'd helped unleash. Inside the precinct, phones rang off hooks. Captains barked orders. Detectives who once laughed off colored complaints now sweated through their shirts. The higher-ups felt the heat from City Hall, from the newspaper's sniffing scandal, from politicians who suddenly remembered Harlem votes mattered. By noon, the NYPD brass caved. They reopened the case, officially, ruled it homicide, no more accidental discharge fairy tale. The medical examiner's report was pulled, contradictions highlighted in red ink. Witnesses who had been too scared to talk before suddenly remembered details. A patrolman on the scene cracked under pressure from internal affairs. Names were named. Detective Marconi, the trigger man, the one with the mob-connected uncle and the fat envelope from the Italians, was arrested in his own apartment before breakfast, handcuffed in his undershirt, cursing the whole way to the tombs. But the system protects its own, until it doesn't have to anymore. 2 nights later, word leaked. Marconi had slipped while being transferred, fell down a flight of stairs or maybe off a pier, details fuzzy. Body fished from the East River the next morning, bruised, waterlogged, official cause listed as drowning while attempting escape. No one mourned. Not the cops who once drank with him, not the brass who'd covered for him, not even his own family showed up loud, just a quick cremation and a small urn nobody claimed right away. Sadie's courage had done what bullets and bribes never could, cracked the facade. Her single act standing in that courtroom, voice steady despite the fear in her eyes, testifying against the killers who took her brother, had ripped open the wound everyone pretended wasn't bleeding. Corrupt cops taking envelopes from mob runners. Protection rackets disguised as law enforcement. A justice system that weighed black lives lighter than a bag of policy slips. Harlem saw it all clearly now, and once seen it couldn't be unseen. In the months that followed, something shifted, quietly at first. A group of church women, nurses, and mothers who'd marched that rainy day pooled what little they had. They bought a narrow brownstone on 131st Street, nothing fancy, just solid walls and good bones. They turned it into a free clinic. Exams, medicine, prenatal care, stitches for knife fights that never made the papers. Named it simply Sadie's House. Bumpy never took credit, never cut a ribbon, never posed for photos. But every month, without fail, an unmarked envelope arrived at the clinic door, thick with cash, no note attached. Enough to keep the lights on, the shelves stocked, the doctors paid. Quiet funding from a man who understood that power wasn't just about fear. Sometimes it was about making sure no other Sadie had to stand alone. Years later, old-timers still pointed to that little building when kids asked about the old days. That's where Harlem started healing itself, they'd say. And that's where Bumpy proved he wasn't just taking, he was giving back. The system had cracked that rainy week in Harlem. Not wide open, not forever. But enough for light to get in. And once light hits truth, it never quite goes dark again. Years later, old-timers still told the tale over dominoes, the funeral where Bumpy pushed back a collar and unleashed hell. 6 careers destroyed, 3 killers gone. Because one woman's death wasn't just a statistic. It was a spark. And Bumpy Johnson made sure it burned the guilty to ash. Police said heart attack. Harlem said murder. Injustice screamed back.